April 10, 2006 meeting was historic in many ways, not the least of which is the energizing of community groups in the Arizona environment that has been under a challenge for decades. But on that date, we were able to come together and to put a public demonstration that's the largest gathering ever in the history of Arizona. 225,000 marchers came together in support of the immigrant community. And it came together from community neighborhood groups, trade unions, faith-based networks, educators, civic organizations, and it formed a coalition, Somos America, We Are America, that within a span of 2 weeks put this phenomenal epic march together. And we're here to celebrate the event with participation by individuals who have given their leadership to the coalition. And we'd like to start off by recognizing that the person who succeeded me, unfortunately, is physically unable to join us today. She is facing a health challenge. And so we send up best wishes for her recovery of health. Following her, Hector Iturralde assumed leadership. Hector, please share your thoughts with us on this occasion.
Thank you, Roberto. Hello to everyone. Welcome. I am going to give a different perspective on this event that happened 15 years ago. When we first met at a union hall to elect the officers for this Somos America, We Are America coalition, first of all, we didn't even have a name. We didn't have any officers. An individual by the name of Martin Manteca organized this meeting, and we had an election of a president, which was Roberto Riveles, vice president and treasurer, which was myself. So Roberto, I came in second, not Lidia, but we'll talk about that later. And within a span, like Roberto said, of 2 weeks, we put this massive event together. And I'm going to more or less focus on the logistics and the financial part of my responsibility. The first thing we had to do was go down to the corporation committee office and register as a nonprofit organization. Now, we needed this because we needed a way to pay for the materials and for the expenses that we were going to incur. One of the things is that when I approached my bank, they told me they could not open up an account for such an organization because 2 weeks prior, we had had a march from St. Agnes Church on 24th Street over to Senator Kyle's office to protest the Sensenbrenner bill, which was an egregious bill for undocumented and people of brown skin. So we expected about 200 people to show up, and lo and behold, we had 24,000. And that scared everyone. It even scared us because we didn't expect to have that many people engaged in such a movement. So with that said, the banks looked at us and said, well, we can't give you an account because of the Patriot Act that was put into law several years prior to eliminate terrorist groups from opening up banking accounts. I guess they thought we were in that category for some reason. We reached out to people in the community. A gentleman by the name of Tommy Espinosa and I had a conversation. I told him we were looking for a bank to open up an account. He directed me to a bank downtown Phoenix, Bank of America at the Kosher Center, I think it's called. And we met with the president there by the name of Mr. Almanza. He told us, and I went with Roberto to open up the account. He told us that every check would be cleared the same day that it was deposited. We were going to be given temporary checks so we could start paying our bills. And that went so smooth. And thank you for those two gentlemen for helping us with, I think the most important part is to exist as an organization and to have funds to pay for everything we needed to pay for. So after we did both of those things, we organized, and it was a very well organized group. We had leaders in the organization that we said, you're going to be in charge of security. You're going to be in charge of the water. You're going to be in charge of A, B, and C. And everyone took their challenge and did a magnificent job. A couple of things I wanted to point out. Number one, we had over 180,000 bottles of water that were donated and purchased by Somos America. I remember renting a U-Haul truck and going down to the Costco store up in North Scottsdale to purchase as much water as they could give us, because a lot of the stores wouldn't sell us any water. I remember going to rent porta potties. We didn't have a lot of money for porta potties. We needed over 100 porta potties so we could spread out throughout the route so that people wouldn't have to do their thing on the side of the road and give us a bad reputation or a bad name, or even get them arrested for doing something like that. Thanks to Mary Rose Wilcox. She donated the money for the porta potties. We had the gentleman that was in charge of that to make sure that they were spread out throughout the route, which, by the way, was a 5-mile route. The other thing is that we met every day, Roberto, myself, we met every day with the law officers that we were going to deal with. We met with the state police, state capitol police. We met with Homeland Security. We met with the Phoenix Police Department. We met with the state troopers, Arizona Department of Public Safety. We were engaged with the law enforcement because we did not want anyone to have any issues with our route, with the businesses that we were going to be walking by. And we also knew that there were going to be many hecklers out there, many people that wanted to create issues and make this an uneventful event instead of have a good event. So our security people, we had, I don't know how many it was, but I think we had over 300 volunteers that were security. They all had orange shirts, I remember, with that said Somos America Security. And their job was to prevent the hecklers along the route from engaging with the people that were on the march, in the march. And they did an excellent job because we had no incidents of anyone being detained, arrested, no property damage. One of the things that really made us very nervous prior to the march was the fact that the last minute, the state required us and the city required us to have a $5 million liability insurance. And that's very costly. And no one would touch us. We had to go to the East Coast company, thanks to one of the union members, that we were able to secure a liability insurance policy that made everything come true. And I think that was faxed over to us like in the last hour on a Friday night before the march. And thank goodness we got that done. And all in all, with the security we had, with the porta potties, with the water donations, I had friends, personal friends, that told me they went out and purchased water, backed up their pickup trucks to the route, threw ice in the bed of the pickup truck with water, and just gave water out to people that were walking by. So everybody in the community came together. It was not just people that were in the organization, but it was the whole community came by. We asked that the American flag, I should say the United States flag, be flown. It was. There were people there with other national flags, but they were politely asked to put them away, which they did. And so I think that the community came together, and we showed that when we have a common cause, you will have people come together. You'll have people that will react, and they will supply their talents to make a successful event. And all in all, being the treasurer at the time and the vice president of Somos America, I have to say that we spent close to $110,000 on that event. And that is pretty expensive, but it was worth it. Thank you for all the people that donated money. You know who you are. Organizations, union people. I mean, everything came together, and it was such a beautiful event. I cannot believe we had over 250,000 people there. I had a state trooper come up to me afterwards and say he estimated 250,000, even though the media was saying it was 150,000. So they're always trying to undercut us in what we actually achieved. But I think all in all, we achieved something that no one has ever done before. And I don't think anyone will ever do it again, because you can't bring 250,000 people together like that under one cause. Again, for civil rights, for the immigrants, and for people of color. And I think it was just a beautiful event.
Thank you very much, Hector. And let me interject that those were the infrastructure, logistics, details that we were engaged in, not knowing what the future held for us.
True.
But that is the backdrop to what Somos America illustrated: success in the streets in organizing the largest peaceful demonstration in the history of Arizona. Then we went on to demonstrate success in the court system. Somos America then became a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit against Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was rounding up people in the neighborhoods, and he was finally convicted of violating the constitutional rights of people by his practice of racial profiling. Then thirdly, we went on to illustrate success in the election process, when we undertook to challenge the sitting state Senate President Russell Pearce, who was the author of SB 1070 that laid out the policy that he, in his own words, said, we want Arizona to make life so miserable for immigrants that those who are thinking of coming won't come, and those that are here will self-deport. So those are the successes that came after we had to deal with the logistics problems that Hector just listed. We'd like to hear from the next person who took leadership. Please self-identify yourself very briefly.
Thank you, Roberto. My name is Luis Avila, and I had the pleasure of being the president of Somos America after Lidia Guzman. And before I get started, I actually want to say how much I appreciate you, Mr. Reveles, for making this space and memorializing such an important moment for all of us. In some ways, the fact that we went from the epicenter of hate to now a battleground state, it's because we're standing on the shoulders of amazing leaders like you, like Alfredo Gutierrez, like Lidia Guzman, and the many others that, tirelessly for decades have been fighting to advance and defend our rights. So I want to say thank you, Mr. Reveles, because you continue to inspire me personally, and you continue to challenge me and asking, what are we doing at the current time with the current challenges that we're living? I also want to say a little bit of my appreciation for Lidia Guzman. Lidia Guzman, to say the truth, was also one of the longest serving leaders of Somos America, the Somos America coalition, but also she led the Times post-March, when a lot of the hate and discrimination against our community kind of diversified and became centers of hate in places like the sheriff's office, the governor's office, the legislature. And she ran a really powerful organization called Respeto, also while coordinating the very difficult coalition that is Somos America, and the very difficult coalition that was then also Somos America, with such a diverse group of voices and backgrounds. I want to also give big thanks to some folks who are not here today, but I think they need to be mentioned. And they are Linda and Tony Herrera, who were the originators and founders of Unidos in Arizona. Two immigrants, one of them a Central American immigrant that escaped the war, a civil war in Central America to come to the United States as an immigrant. And her husband, Tony, a Mexican American man who also worked very closely on the advancement of civil rights. And one thing that we cannot forget is that a lot of these organizations of the marches originated with their work in churches and their mobilization of immigrant communities as well. And one thing that was very important for me to uplift today is that truly the marches that were organized in 2006, 2005, 2007, in big part were led actually by immigrant voices, like the Maya Chapin coalition with immigrants from Central America that were a big part of the organizing and the volunteering of the different segments of the marches and the protests. And also people who worked in media, people who had radio shows and organized people also through the waves, the radio waves like Elias Bermudez, even El Cucuy de la Mañana, and many others that, while many controversies happened at the moment and at the time, were very critical part of mobilizing community members at that time. And I want to remind everybody that HR 4437 is the reason why we were marching on that day of April 10th, 2006. A bill that would have made being an undocumented immigrant a felony. That was what we were marching for. But beyond the fact that this bill will make immigrants a felon, it would also make those who were harboring them criminals. And besides that, it presented a unique opportunity for the first time in this country to have a real conversation about immigration reform since the amnesty of the 1980s. One thing that I want to make sure that we remember is that while we were fighting against Sensenbrenner bill, HR 4437 in 2006, the really big reason why people were coming out was because they wanted to also make sure that we have relief. And that now in 2021, years later, 15 years later, of these huge mobilization efforts, we're still in the same boat. We don't have immigration reform. We still see states passing anti-immigrant legislation and still attacking our community just in the last 4 years with the president that we had. In March 10, one thing I want to kind of bring up is that in March 10 of 2006, the first marches actually occurred in the city of Chicago and in the city of Phoenix. The city of Phoenix tried to create a solidarity march at the same time, where they were expecting about 500 people on the side of a church on 424th Street on McDowell. And I don't know if you remember this, Roberto, but those 500 people became 5,000. And everybody was very surprised by the amount of energy that was in the community. And that kind of propelled a conversation about, should we march again? And should we march again? And should we march again? That day in 2006, March 10, the 5,000 people showed up in Phoenix, kind of gave us the imagination to try to coordinate how we were going to be organizing the future. By March 25th in Los Angeles, La Gran Marcha happened. 1.5 million people showed up in March 25th in Los Angeles. I had the pleasure of driving to Los Angeles to volunteer and participate in those marches. And then in April 10, 15 years ago today, 250,000 people plus showed up in this incredible march, Somos America, in Phoenix, Arizona. One of the biggest memories I have of that day is how peaceful that march was. People were wearing white. As Hector was mentioning, back then there was a big controversy, and it might seem, kind of irrelevant today, but there was a lot of tension in the conversation about having American flags and having flags from other countries, like the Mexican flag. Some people were marching down the streets with their Mexican flags, showing their pride. And I remember there was a huge effort to ensure that people were only flying American flags in the march. Back then, that was a big attack in our community about that thing. The news were covering the fact that we were having flags from other countries. Now, if you thought about that, that wouldn't be a big deal in a march today, but 15 years ago it was. And that shows a little bit of the different narrative and the way that we're making meaning of belonging in this country, or what it means to even belong in this society. The one memory that I have very clearly is that I remember at one point in the march, we went under a bridge to pass towards the downtown area. And I remember just the roar of these hundreds of thousands of people echoing through that bridge, the drums really loud, the people clamoring for justice and clamoring for relief. And I just to remember right now, I get goosebumps because, to be honest, it was one of the most moving moments in the march. That sound that was amplified by that echo of the bridge moved people to tears. People were so moved by it that some of them standed there. I remember that I stood at the bridge for a while trying to move people to continue walking because they were so mesmerized by the sound that they wanted to stay in that bridge. Radio stations played a really big role for the first time in a long time. And to be honest, to date, we saw a coordination of all Spanish language media to send the same messages to the community. We're white, follow these instructions, meet in this place, follow these rules. And that level of coordination was very powerful for news outlets like Univision and Telemundo, who have historically been competitors, to actually come together and send the same message. We were at some point in that time giving talking points to the media for them to repeat them. I mean, that is unheard of. That's unheard of. The media would actually grab our talking points and actually share them for the safety of community. That was a really powerful moment. And finally, while all of this sounds incredibly inspiring, I also don't want to turn a blind eye to the extremely difficult work of coalition building. Somos America was the longest and the largest immigrant rights coalition that Arizona has ever seen. And one of the most powerful things at that moment was how difficult, to be honest, it was to be in a room with so many diversity in voices, with people who wanted to burn down the Capitol, and people who wanted to take down the doors of the Capitol, to people who wanted to simply, have a press conference, to people who wanted to talk to the business community, while others wanted to talk to the faith community, while people wanted to speak Spanish and others in English, and what were we talking about making space for Central American immigrants, and what about immigrants from the Caribbean and Black immigrants. And it was just such an incredibly rich and diverse group of people in one room with different languages and different backgrounds and experiences. And I will say that today, it has been one of the most enriching experiences of my life to be in a room and facilitate conversations with people who have such incredibly diverse views, such incredibly diverse values, and such incredibly diverse strategies to approach the same goal. So I'll leave you with that. Well, a lot of really beautiful and inspirational moments in that march. The difficult work that I know Roberto, Hector, Lydia, Martin Manteca, and many others did to actually make that march happen in 2 weeks was heroic. And in hindsight, I don't even know how that happened. Even with the rationale of hearing you all explain with the logistics, I don't know if at this moment we will be able to pull something like that in 2 weeks, to be honest. So that's me, Roberto. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Luis. And let me interject that the next speaker is the personification of the goal that we were reaching for when we started as Arizona Hispanic Community Forum, where we undertook a project of community empowerment, hoping to be able to lend our assistance to the people who were newly energizing the American experience. Community empowerment was what we entitled it. And the next speaker, to me, personifies that we got there, because he too, in assuming this position and what he went on to do, was an historic event of major proportions. So Daniel Rodriguez, let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Roberto. I want to just briefly repeat what Luis said. I'm just really humbled to be here in amongst all of you Roberto, thank you so much for the guidance and the mentorship that you have provided throughout the years. I was freshly out of high school when I learned about this talk and this discussion about this march going on. I had graduated from Trevor Brown High School, and I was now at ASU meeting probably a handful of people that really changed the trajectory of my life. Among them, of course, the people in participating here today, Roberto, Luis Avila, who has been very supportive and of the work that immigrant youth have been doing. And talking about immigrant youth, unlike some of the speakers, you can probably tell I'm in a car, and that is because today we are celebrating a wedding of two very influential and very active immigrant youth leaders. But I did not want to miss this opportunity to be here today and celebrate the anniversary of this seminal event that was the march. And so that's why I'm in a car. I remember that when I heard about this march, I was one of those little angry brown kids that wanted to have a Mexican flag. I was one of those angry little Mexican kids that wanted to jump the fence and skip school and go tell people that I was really mad about what was going on. And I learned so much from my early days organizing in that march. One, I saw the giants like Hector, like Lydia, like Roberto, like all I saw them working so hard for our communities. And I also felt where's the next generation? We were working in conditions where we didn't have the privilege of having already created networks, foundations, mentorship programs. Yes, there were groups, but for the task that we had at hand to change the trajectory of the nation in terms of where we were going with immigration reform, immigrant rights, and the fight and the movement against hate. To me, I wholeheartedly believe that that began in Arizona, at least in the last 20 years. And so when I asked the question, where does the mentorship come from? I remember that one of the individuals that really changed the way that I thought about mentorship was Luis Avila. Because for many of us, we thought about mentorship as, well, who has already been there? Who has already done that? Who's older than me and who's going to tell me what to do? And when you work in spaces that are so new, in fights that are constantly changing, sometimes you don't have that, and so you look to your peers. And Luis Avila was a peer that, for me, was always there and said, I'm here, let's work together, let's brainstorm, let's see what we can do to create change. And I took that to heart. And so one of the things that I noticed in those early marches and in organizing and being in that large union hall where we broke down into little groups and circles, that there wasn't a lot of students. There wasn't a lot of people my age. And a lot of people my age that were there were not undocumented. And you had individuals like Dulce Juarez, who was very involved around that time as well, with a lot of students. But I wanted more. I wanted to see more students take roles of leadership. And I took up that mantle for many years to instigate, to get other students mad, and to tell them that we can do something. And maybe I wasn't older, maybe I wasn't accomplished, but Luisa taught me that peers can be mentors. Peers can create change. We can create new spaces together. And so that's the work that I did with Somos America. I continued to work with immigrant youth and eventually helped co-found the Arizona Dream Act Coalition. That was that was after actually the big marches. So a lot of the immigrant youth work that have been done in Arizona, you can trace back the leadership and the work directly back to the march that was organized by Somos America because of the messaging, because of the leadership. In fact, one of the mantles of national messaging around immigrant youth was the education, not deportation campaigns. And education, not deportation was a mantle that Arizona was taking up already in late 2006, that in years later, up into 2010, it was being used now on a national level. And so all these connections with the work of immigrant youth in Arizona were very key in my experience of the national immigrant youth movement, but also very key in the spaces that we were creating for immigrant youth like myself to become leaders, which was very, very new to me, at least, in terms of where do we belong? The spaces that Somos America helped create included the space of immigrant youth being able to be in control of the messaging that we wanted, in control of the narrative, in control of the spaces that we were creating and what we were going to fight for. And to see that now materialize with some of my peers now being elected leaders, running for office, handling campaigns of other individuals that run for office, it is tremendous impact. One of the things that I really enjoyed in the work that I did with Somos America, and that I believe, and I hope that helped define my work with Somos America, was I don't consider myself a politically astute person. And definitely in those times I wasn't. I was just really, really mad about what was going on. But when you do political work, sometimes it's hard to do political work because of the coalition building, because of the messaging, and should we have flags or not, because of the different interests that you have to fight and negotiate with. But when you do work for people, it is actually very easy, because your body, your mind, your emotions tell you something when something is wrong. And when I was a mad, young little brown kid from Trevor Brown High School, and I was really mad, that to me was me saying, there's something wrong with what is going on in this state. There is something wrong. And I don't need to be a governor. I don't need to be a president. I don't need to be a representative to know that it's wrong and that it has to change. And I say that because I know a lot of you guys saw how passionate I was, and I hope to still be. And the space that was open to me was really meaningful. I'm grateful for it. And I hope that I have done the work since then to create that space for others, because sometimes all you need is to tell people what's going on, to let them process it how they need to give them the spaces and the tools and the resources to go and make a difference. And for me, the spaces that Somos America created did just that. So I want to thank you as a coalition and as previous leaders and as current leaders for that work, because I know for a fact that that work was very important, not to me, but for the work, again, that immigrant youth have done since then in the state and across the country. So thank you again. And I hope that I can contribute a little bit more in the conversation that's coming up.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And let me underscore what you said about the Trevor Brown students. When I witnessed their taking a stand publicly in the public streets, exercising the constitutional rights of all of us to peaceably assemble, and I heard them say, "We are no longer afraid." How empowering can it get? We are no longer afraid. And so, Daniel, Luis, you are part of what motivated them to express that empowerment. And you represent the group that is energizing America today to return to its roots of working for the people in peaceable assembly, regardless of how much in the minority one is. And so I'd like to hear from the next participant, who was also from the young community of immigrants. Margarito, por favor. Is Margarito unmuted?
Sorry
Nice.
about that. Thank you, Roberto. And I want to thank everybody that was able to be part of this panel discussion, as well as our guest today, to hear about the great story of Somos America and our individual stories. I say that because this is the first time that at least that I'm more comfortable sharing my personal story and also my involvement with Somos America. So I'll try to do it as fast as I can to give you an idea of how I got involved and the reason and the drive behind it. In 2004, you may have seen, or there was some local news about the then county attorney, Andrew Thomas, prosecuting several people, 10 individuals for something to do with voter registration. Well, I was one of them. So prior to the 2006 March, I, in a sense, had to deal with that legal situation on my own personally. And I was not involved in the community. I was just busy trying to take care of that, going to work and also going to ASU. So when I started hearing about mobilization and people demonstrating and all of that, I decided to take part in that. Hector and Roberto mentioned the march prior to April 10th. I was not able to attend that one. I was out of town. But when I came back and I found out there was an opportunity to still go out and, participate in something like that, I decided to do that. I went to the April 10th march. I tried to catch the people at the beginning of Veterans Memorial Coliseum, but by the time I showed up, everything had been said and the marchers had started. So I drove down to downtown Phoenix, parked somewhere, and then I tried to catch the giant wave. I stood near First Avenue and Adams, and back then I had my little camera, so I started recording a few clips of this massive wave of people just coming through, and it just kept going on and on, and I was so impressed by it. I was able to join it for a portion of it and walk towards where it ended at the state capitol. And again, this year, 2006, I didn't know anybody in the community. I was just going out there as an individual, and I was so amazed by it. I did get a chance to talk to an individual named Alfredo Gutierrez at the end and told him, I'm one of the individuals that they're talking about in the news that is going through this. And he basically mentioned just, fight your case to the highest level that you can and encourage me to just, continue fighting my individual case. So, then I was going to college, working at the same time. A year later, through ASU and Valle del Sol, I believe they did a partnership of a program called Young Latino Leaders. And I don't know, I think it was a 6 or 7 week course where they help young college students get involved in the community, do different sessions. And one of those sessions, they had a presenter by the name of Roberto Reveles and his partner, Linda Brown, talking about civic engagement. So that's the first time I met and found out about Roberto and Linda. So after the program, I just made a commitment to really get involved in the community and do whatever I could to just get informed and do my part. So a year later, again in 2007, I started attending the meetings. One of the first meetings or the groups was No Más Muertes, No More Deaths. And if everybody knows, once you kind of get a little bit of involvement or attend one group, you really find out about the rest. So from No More Deaths, I found out about a Somos America 72-hour citizenship drive and attended that for a day or two. And then Martin Manteca invited me to the Somos meeting. So I said, I'll check them out. So from there on, again, I never left Somos America. I became involved and did what I could. And really, the summary is that I was amazed by my participation in the community and the different groups, and really the I guess considered free knowledge of, civic engagement, politics, getting involved and making changes. My leadership with Somos America really took place from 2011 to 2015 when I assumed the role or took over the role of the president. And honestly, I just carried the baton as best as I could, do whatever I could at that time and continue doing the things that Somos America stood for. At that point, really the peak of it, as Roberto mentions, was being the plaintiff to in this lawsuit, Ortega Melendres, and seeing it hopefully come to fruition. So those years I did whatever I could to have people involved, informed, and engaged. And luckily, at the end of my leadership role, I was able to see some kind of relief in terms of what the result was. And some of the things was compensation for victims of racial profiling. I was a little bit upset because if you get involved for so long and you see a little bit light at the end of the tunnel and you see some kind of successes, it kind of comes too late. A lot of these people that were compensated, it was hard to get to solicit or get folks to fill out the application for compensation. And sadly, some of them, had been returned to their home, majority of them back to Mexico. So if I could say that's something that kind of left an impact on me on that, is that it's, the struggle for justice and these things sometimes take a long time, but we should be able to really celebrate our successes, even if they're minor ones that would lead to bigger ones. So in wrapping up, again, I just want to say that I've had a tremendous experience being involved in the community, taking on these leadership roles. And but I will say again that it is difficult to try to find volunteer people that are, that are good-hearted, that are well-intentioned, that do this because it comes out of their heart, and they do it on a volunteer basis. So what I see going forward in terms of other battles, like, our right to vote right now, is really getting the young folks engaged for a long time and committed, knowing that obviously we have our own lives and we have our own personal goals for growth and all of that. So that's the kind of challenge that I see. But again, I am grateful to be part of this group and be able to share or have gone through a lot of amazing memories. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Margarito. And you mentioned being present when Linda Brown and I were making a presentation. We were making a presentation that took us all over the community because we were trying to demolish the myths about immigration, and we would present fact versus myth. And thankfully, it had people in the audience like you who were able to assume new responsibilities as part of the challenge that we were putting out to the community. And the final participant in the panel discussion is someone who has been continuing the essence of what Somos America does. The next person wasn't the president of Somos, but she may as well have been, because her effectiveness in continuing to this day, to provide housing, to provide food, to provide help to the undocumented and to the incoming migrants. She has opened up her own house to people in need. Irene, welcome. Irene Chavez, are you unmuted? Ellie, is she unmuted?
She has to do it from her end, unfortunately.
And we're unable to communicate with her yet?
Correct.
Well, Irene, like I say, has personified the mission of Somos America. Not only civic engagement, but
She's not connected.
opening up her own personal resources to help those that need help. We will then go next, Ellie, if you will, to the chat room, the questions, and then I'll have some closing remarks, but the questions will be to the panelists. Feel free, panelists, to respond. Ellie?
Yes, well, there hasn't been any questions placed in the chat, so at many requests. So if you would like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question now, please go ahead and do so. We have a quiet audience.
Well, in the meantime, let me, as a filler, point out that one of the missions that began before Somos, like I said, was community empowerment. And the panelists themselves are illustrative that they have become empowered. Daniel Rodriguez, I'm so proud to note that you made history in Arizona in the field of law. Would you please share with the audience that you became a member of the Arizona bar in a very unique status?
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. I went to Arizona State University. I graduated Arizona State in 2008 with degrees in political science and English literature. So throughout the years of marching and organizing, I was also going to college like many of us were. And I wanted to go to law school. And that was my dream at the time, to go to law school. And I started law school in 2008 and I finished 1 year. In 2009, I had to stop law school because by that time, Arizona voters had already passed Proposition 300, which was, in line with a whole bunch of anti-immigrant bills that sort of really promulgated and pushed and really created this immigrant rights movement in Arizona, starting with English only laws, and then Proposition 200, and then Proposition 300, and then HR, the one that would felonize undocumented status. And it was just on and on and on. But the point is, I had to stop law school because I couldn't qualify. And even till today, undocumented students do not qualify for in-state tuition. We have to pay 3 times as much in tuition as other students. And I just didn't have the money. There were 2 private scholarships that I had. One of them was taken away because it began to require a social security number. And the other one, it was given by a family that had a lot of money in real estate, which in 2009 was not doing well. So then I had to take a leave of absence from law school. It was between 2009 and 2012 that I really focused on building the immigrant youth movement in Arizona, including the campaign at the national level with the United We Dream Network of Education Not Deportation that eventually resulted in Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was a campaign that was launched by immigrant youth and supported by allies across the country. And in 2012, I always tell people, it seems like every time I'm going to law school, Obama was trying to be president and asking for money. Because the first year was in 2008, and he was running for president and asking for money, and so was I. And in 2012, same thing. He was running for re-election and asking for money. And I said, well, I need to go back to law school or else I'm going to lose my first year. And I need to ask for money because I don't qualify for scholarships. Even though the law school wanted to give me a scholarship, the law wouldn't allow it. And it was then when actually speaking earlier about the mentorship that Luis Avila had really provided, Luis was like, well, Daniel, just kind of tell your story and people maybe they'll fund your education campaign. Because after all, it was a campaign. It wasn't about just me being an attorney. It was about me giving back and continuing to use my education to give back in some way. And Luis said, well, tell me about why you want to be an attorney. And I told him, we were in a coffee shop. And I said, well, ever since I was 7, I remember that. And he said, that's it. That's your campaign. Ever since I was 7. So then I created an online campaign called Ever Since I Was 7 using WordPress. And I told people, this is who I am. This is the work that I've done. I want to go to law school. Can you help me out? And it was really because of the community efforts, because of members in my community that really believed in the work that I was doing and that I would give back, that I was able to fundraise $80,000 in order to finish law school. And in 2014, I graduated from the Arizona State University College of Law. But the issue was, can I be an attorney? There was other, of course, I'm not unique. There was other students across the country that had finished law school undocumented. And in some states, they were denied their bar license. And so one of the individuals that I met through the Somos America coalition was Danny Ortega. Him, Antonio Bustamante, other attorneys that I met in the coalition, I started to reach out to and say, and ask, hey, I'm about to graduate. I don't know what's going to happen. Are you going to back me up? And are we going to sue somebody if I don't get licensed? Are we going to like push this issue? And they were completely, on board. We were talking about potential legal strategies. And in 2014, when I graduated, I just took the bar exam. I waited, and we didn't know what was going to happen. There was nobody that I could think of. And even if today there's someone that was in my position that I'm not aware of, please let me know, because that person deserves credit. We didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember getting a document, a letter in the mail saying, congratulations, you have been admitted to the bar. And it was then that I became the first undocumented attorney in the state of Arizona. The funny part is that they were willing to give me a law license, a bar license in Arizona, before they gave me a driver's license, because they wouldn't give me a driver's license. So they said, you could be an attorney, but you just can't drive a car. And again, it goes back to if my posts for my campaign are still up there, ever since I was 7.wordpress.com. And a lot of the stories that I tell are stories about working with immigrant youth, working in the marches, working with Somos America, because people long for those stories of change, of power, of community empowerment and involvement. And so it was a way for me to realize my dream while also remain true to the work of giving back to the community and uplifting those stories. So thank you, Roberto, for giving me that opportunity to share that.
Yes, and Daniel, your words right now are so desperately needed throughout the nation and throughout all of the student population: brown skin, black skin, white people, people of color, Native Americans. The student generation today that has been victimized by the pandemic needs to hear your story, that your barriers did not hold you back. And we encourage the young people today, do not let the pandemic set your own education back. So thank you for that very motivating narrative, Daniel, of your own ability to jump over those barriers. Ellie, I understand we have a question from the chat room.
Do. And Fred, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? I'll give you just a few seconds, and then if not, I'll go ahead and read it for you.
Sure, I can. It's just a little loud here, but hi everyone, Fred Oaxaca, he, him. The question I have is, what's a strength that you all thought, or you all think you all have or had, that you couldn't do you couldn't have without, and made the event successful? And also, what's something that was lacking that would have made it more effective or bigger or more powerful?
Anyone from the panel, please.
Roberto,
Luis?
I'll jump in really quick. I think one thing I remember even back then that I mentioned a lot, and I got in trouble with a few people because I kept mentioning it every week at the meetings, was what to do with the database that we were creating from that march, right? So, the slogan, today we march, tomorrow we vote, hopefully was going to translate into a voter registration effort. There were, dozens of volunteers doing voter registration that day. I know there were a lot of voter registration forms filled out. But unfortunately, I don't think back then we had the level of focus or rigor to data and contacts and list building that we have today. And I think it would have probably helped Somos America Coalition a whole lot if we would have had the vision to actually create a database, to use that database as a base for power building in the future. Probably at the time of 1070, 4 years later, that would have been a huge huge help, right? For us to have a list of even 100,000 or 50,000 people for us to contact and mobilize. That's in hindsight, Fred, something that I remember talking about. And while there were some contacts and a lot of contacts that were acquired, they were mostly kept by the labor unions and not, we don't know what happened to them. We don't know how they were used. So that in hindsight was something I feel that was a blind spot of a movement. I personally will tell you, Fred, to the question about strength, I launched a magazine when I was 15 years old. And since then, I've been facilitating meetings every week. So I think facilitation is one thing that I couldn't live without. I'm not very good at many things, but I can keep a meeting running. So I think that's what it was. That was the power back then.
Yes. Ellie, do we have another question?
No, not yet. But I do know that Luis has a statement to read too, if you want to get to that at some point. But no, I think take the liberty to fill up.
Thank you. Mr. Reveles, do you want me to read Ralph Martinez's statement?
Yes, please.
Do you want to tell the group who Mr. Martinez is before I read it?
Ralph Martinez is the current president of Somos America. And unfortunately, he had some personal affairs that he couldn't set aside to be with us in person. So, Luis, please.
So just to clarify, these are not my words. These are Mr. Martinez's words, so I'll be reading them on his behalf. Let me say thanks to all the panelists for taking part in this webinar. I know they have so much to offer the audience as they share their experiences. Special thanks to Mr. Roberto Reveles for having the inspiration and foresight to celebrate the 15th anniversary of Somos America, We Are America. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight. I had a conflict with previous plans. However, I am what some people call Johnny Come Lately, as I was not involved with the early civil rights activities in which Somos America was involved at that time. I only know the history of the turmoil created by SB 1070 and the Joe Arpaio controversy, which stirred up the Latino community. That steering was a call to action to which the Latino community responded with protests and a great demonstration march like the likes of Phoenix had never seen, and hopefully may never be necessary again. But it is not off the table, I am sure. I'm currently the president of Somos America and have had the pleasure since 2018. We are in a semi-stand down as we are in the process of refocusing our priorities and our mission statement to determine the services we may be able to offer to the community. At present, we're working with the ACLU regarding the Melendres lawsuit and the federal court orders that were inherited by Sheriff Paul Penzon. Things are not going so well. We were asked to determine what we would like to see come out of this webinar. Surely there will be much to draw and build on that. Hopefully, we'll encourage young men and women to pick up what still remains to be done. I would like to see Somos America and other community activists organizations coalesce to establish strategies to counter the various federal and local political policies that impact our community in a negative way. Together, we're stronger. We must not allow ourselves to be divided. One last comment. I have been told Latinos will be the largest ethnic group in the United States. And to that I say, so what? What will we do with that? Without making sure our children stay in school and get good solid education, we will not be able to have a seat at the table of power. A majority means nothing if we allow the minority to maintain control. I leave you with this example. South Africa, apartheid, where the minority rule over the majority. And those are the words of Mr. Ralph Martinez, the current president of Somos America.
Thank you very much, Luis. And let me sort of wrap up and reflect the comments that we've shared from the panelists, that we moved from that march using the theme Hoy marchamos, mañana votamos. Today we march, tomorrow we vote. And isn't it ironic that today the biggest challenge facing our community and the community at large is the massive number of anti-voting proposals that are being pushed not only in Arizona, but throughout the country. And let me just highlight that among the marchers that were with us 15 years ago, they are now sitting as office holders in city councils throughout Arizona, on school boards throughout Arizona, serving in the state legislature, and serving not only on staff of Congress members, but as Congress members themselves. And so the challenge that we're left with today is to continue reaching out to the new groups that were energized by the March of 2006, that have gone beyond the interest of the immigrant community. They have, for example, taken the lead in approving an initiative approved by the voters of Arizona to increase the minimum wage for everybody. And we continue to see example after example of immigrants, minorities, struggling to keep the American dream alive for everybody, returning to the principles of the founding of our nation, of equal justice under the law. And so to me, this has been a wonderful day to reflect that when immigrants first started coming to our country, they came as indentured servants from England, as starving residents of Ireland, of persecuted people from Eastern Europe, all welcomed by our forefathers, our antecedents, la gente indígena, the Native Americans, who today continue to struggle to enjoy the full benefits of citizenship in the United States. So thank you, participants. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ellie. And may we continue to celebrate the growth of America. Thank you.
Roberto,
Thank you, Ellie.
hello?
Margarito.
Yes, I do want to be respectful of people's times and if they need to leave, but in light of this being a celebratory event, I know we spoke a lot and I know folks have to go, but I wanted to do like a light activity event here at the end. As you know, I've been involved with different groups, primarily with Somos. But what we did when we had these kind of anniversary events, we would be in the Union Hall or somewhere. We have more visuals. You did see some pictures and all of that. But what I want to do, and I'm sure Lydia would have enjoyed this as well, is I kept a lot of these shirts that I got from different groups and organizations. So I guess if you all have to leave, I understand that. I was going to show the different shirts that I captured. You may recognize the groups and organizations and all of that. But I just wanted to do that as one final gesture here as we wrap it up. And again, I don't want to take more people's time, but I also wanted this to be kind of fun and celebratory. So, but again, I don't want to go off the program if it needs to end. I was just going to kind of pass through and show the different shirts that we had. And again, you may recognize.
Please share.
The first one is, you guys know the original shirt from back then, 2006. You guys remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
All right. I mentioned the first organization that I got involved with was No Mas Muertes, so I got their shirt also. There was also another group that did a little similar things to No More Deaths, and they were Humane Borders. I also want to recognize Roberto because I do remember that he is one of the folks that was part of that group, the volunteers that would go out there and put water in the desert for the migrants. This one may be a little bit controversial, but you guys know that Lucha and other groups kind of were part of it. If you remember Border Action Network, they were also influential in Tucson as well. This one is a different one. It's called Arizona Community Press. It sort of came together after like the Occupy movement and different groups also. This one, you may recognize it from what started as the 35th Street Organizing Committee or group that later grew and became its own group, Puente. They had a lot of shirts like this around that time. And what I had mentioned that, or in terms of strategies, when they asked that question, what would you like to have seen? I know it was a lot of people, 250,000 in one event, but subsequent marches and events, I think, were successful because they were able to create like little cell groups or affinity groups at the end where they can kind of meet up with their neighbors or work together in community organizing. And I know that Salvador Reyes and Tonatiera did a lot of that, and they created what were called the CDBs or Comités en Defensa del Barrio. Let's see what else. Again, I don't want to take too much time. You guys know Lucha. This is an old Lucha shirt. I think I can fast forward to the most recent shirt that they're using, which is pretty cool.
It's like a history through shirts. I love it.
Right, then there's more, but I only wanted to take a few minutes of this because it's a little memento that you keep and you remember those times that you were active or participating in the different groups and the different events that happened throughout. So I keep those with me for memories. So I appreciate the few minutes that you gave me here at the end, Roberto.
Sure. And anybody else that wants to close off with anything else, please feel free.
You know, Roberto, I will say, as a white woman who's been doing some community organizing work in the arts and humanities and like religious realm over the last few years, I will say that I had no idea who all was involved in Somos America since its founding until this actual preparation for this presentation. And I have heard all of your names spoken with such high regard, with, if I may, I apologize to my elders for saying things that are whatever, but you're all badass. And it is so good to, like I said earlier, to like work in communities of young folks that you still continue to aspire. And they're wonderful and you're wonderful. And it's just been a pleasure to really hear these stories. And I hope that we can continue to hear these stories. You know, my friend and I were sitting here saying, what about the archives? What about the videos? What about taking pictures of those shirts so that way we can add it all? Because in a time when we are connected through virtual means, having these visual images accessible is a valuable part of the story. And so please continue to do the work that you do. Share those pictures. Dr. Marin is on the call too, and she's Arizona's historian. So yeah, thank you. Just what an honor. What an honor. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Ellie, for putting your technology information age tools to work for us, because speaking as the oldest geezer on the panel, that's beyond my ability to even attempt. So thank you very much for helping put this webinar together.
Indeed. And I'll say really quick though, it's because of Luis and his work with his newest comrades and the work that they do to get the information out. I have sat in on many informational sessions in 2020 from his organization, and without seeing not necessarily what they're teaching, but how they're teaching it, how they're using the chat, how they use the emoticons that you can pop up, what, you know, just the organization of everything. Even though I flundered a little bit tonight, I have learned from his group of young folks. So thank you, Luis, for finding ways to help us communicate better.
Muchísimas gracias a todos. Thank you all very, very much, and look forward to accepting some new challenges and moving on and demonstrating that we not only march, we engage. Thank you very much again. Good night.